All right. Well, hello and welcome. I am Morgan Scott, and I am the Research Manager of EPRI's Sustainability and Ecosystem Stewardship Research Group. I am joined by two wonderful panelists that I will introduce shortly, but I am really pleased to be facilitating today's sixth and final session of EPRI's speaker series for Earth Week. The previous 5 sessions that started on Monday have really been focused on the topics of decarbonization and our low carbon resources initiative. And so today, with the backdrop of the announcement yesterday of a 50% by 2030 decarbonization target, we are going to take a deeper dive into the people part of this conversation to think about potential impacts and opportunities when it comes to communities and the workforce within the clean energy transition. So as we get started, I want to have a couple of housekeeping notes. You have been muted upon entry, so please keep that in mind. And we are asking that you keep your cameras off if possible so that we can reduce bandwidth challenges. We ask that you do use the chat, though. We would love to have a conversation with you, and I have my chat panel. I'm going to open it up right now. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see that chat panel. You can open it right up and drop any questions or comments that you'd like to add to the conversation there. Also, a note that we are recording today's session, so your participation provides your consent to the recording. And we are going to post the recordings for all of these sessions to the EPRI.com website. And we'll communicate when those are posted if you want to go back or share those with others. So let's get right into the conversation. I am joined today by two fantastic panelists. We have Sandy Nessing, who is the Managing Director of Sustainability at American Electric Power, and also Charmaine Davis, who is our very own VP of HR and Diversity here at EPRI. And we really have a lot to dig into here. So I'm just going to jump right into the questions, and just to continue to remind you, if you want to ask a question, drop it right into the chat. So I want to actually start in what might feel like an odd space, but I want to start with the concept of language and words. And really that's because over the past 6 months, I feel like I've been in a number of conversations here, and there's just a plethora of words, and it really, I think, sometimes complicates and challenges the communication in this space. So, Sandy, I'm going to start with you. And when I think about the energy transition and the terms that we hear just transition, energy justice, environmental justice, climate justice, right? All the different types of justice, like procedural and distributive. So I'm not going to ask you to define all of these terms. That would be cruel. But I wonder for AEP, right, at a high level, how are you characterizing this topic, this idea, and what are you thinking about when it comes to the people aspect of the clean energy transition?
Wow, so that's really a loaded question, Morgan. There's a lot to unpack there. So yeah, environmental justice and just transition. We were really focusing initially on just transition because to your point, this is all about people, correct? And the transition from fossil economy to clean energy economy, that's an economic transition that we're talking about that does impact people and communities. You know, we know that the impact of a coal plant retirement, for example, goes far beyond the fence line of the plant. And so what we've been doing is really focusing, well, what is that impact? And then how do we address that without having to write a blank check or walking away, because we don't want to do that either. Environmental justice, on the other side, on the other hand, has been showing up in some very interesting ways in several of our states. And that is really focused on whether, I mean, this is an issue that's been around for decades, right? I mean, it's not a new issue, but the way that it's showing up is, are you doing something that is disproportionately impacting underserved, underrepresented communities? Are you considering, when you're siting a transmission line, for example, where you're putting it? Are you reaching out to those communities? Do you understand the socioeconomic and demographic makeup of those communities? Those are some of those questions we've not really thought about it in that way before, and we certainly have to begin to do that now. Defining it, I think, you know, having spoken to many of my peers, I think we're still all trying to figure that out, because you have to define what it means for you, but also have the flexibility to adapt, because it's not a one size fits all. I'm seeing very big differences jurisdiction to jurisdiction. There are some common themes, and I think that there's going to be, just transition, environmental justice. I think they are different, but I also think there's a lot of similarities, and they will overlap over time. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And Charmaine, I know this is something you and I have talked about as well, right? So all these words: diversity, equity, equality, inclusion, and justice. Again, not asking you to define everything, but when you think about your experience and background and the role you have at the Institute, how are you characterizing what's needed from a workforce development and support standpoint?
Yeah, I echo a little bit of what Sandy said as well, because you're right, Sandy, like they mean different things to different people, those words do, and it depends on the culture that you drop those words into. But when I think about all those words, and those are some heavy words, and we've learned a lot more about those over the last 18 months than we probably had before. When I think about those words in the context of a workforce development or support strategy, one of the things here at EPRI and in my role is looking at moving our diversity needle. We're a hugely diverse organization. We've got a global workforce. We have tons of different technical expertise in our organization, but inclusivity is pretty important, because in order to attract but also retain the diverse talent that we have, we do need to move the needle in inclusivity. And not saying that we're not inclusive, I'm saying that we need to be more inclusive because we're even more diverse. And as this company grows, as this world continues to evolve, we're going to become even more diverse. And how do we make sure that we attract and retain those individuals? So one of the things that I put into place recently was an article called Diversity Speaks. And Diversity Speaks, the intent of that was to foster more inclusivity inside of our organization, to make sure that people felt like they could speak. So Diversity Speaks actually highlights each month a different heritage month. So in February, for example, we did African American History Month. In March, we did Women's History Month. April is diversity, celebrating diversity. And so we asked employees to send in 1-minute videos about why is diversity important to you at EPRI? What does it mean to you? And so we can put together a video collage. Those are activities that I am hoping that will foster inclusivity, open up conversation, people understanding where other people are from. It will create the equality. It will also, close to what Sandy was saying with AEP, but a little bit different from an EPRI perspective, but going out into our communities and making sure that we are showing up and becoming an employer of choice in the communities in which we live and work every day. I think it's critically important that, if you're in elementary school or middle school or high school, do you even know what a STEM career could be about for you? Do you know what those opportunities are for you? I think that it will help. And it's going to be a journey, right? It's not going to be one of those opportunities where we kind of say, okay, we did that and now we've got this great workforce that's ready for us. It's going to be the thing that we're going to have to continue on. And I'm really excited about leading that here at EPRI. But getting out into our communities and showing what STEM is about will help also with this clean energy transition. There's new technology that's coming up. There's new ways to do work in our energy and utility industry. How do we make sure that the workforce is ready for us and that we're ready for them? So.
Yeah, I'd like to just if I could just build on that just a little bit, Charmaine, I think you're spot on. It starts inside, right? Inside the company. We've got to get that right for us first to be able to have those candid conversations and have those sensitivities when we go into the communities. At AEP, one of the things that we're doing is called safe space conversations. And it's with all of our different, employee resource groups, but it's having a safe space to have a conversation about racism, about bias. I participated in one a couple of weeks ago that where Asian American employees talked about how some of their family members were among those being targeted. Is this Asian hate and people who are afraid to go to work or walk out, to their car because they're going to get attacked in some way. I think, we're increasingly aware of these things, and we have to be. That's part of the process. If we're not aware of that, how are we going to bring that out into the community and engage people externally? So I think what we're doing within our companies is very important, and it's a very critical piece of how we address environmental justice going forward.
Right, right.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. So let's actually stay inside the company, because I think that this is important. And you both have just talked about sort of the diversity and inclusion aspect of this. There's also a transition of the workforce aspect of this as we look at this clean energy transition. And Sandy, I know AEP has been doing a lot of thinking around this, and you both are working in the space of skills assessments or have had something to do with that. So Sandy, maybe start with you and tell me a little bit about what skills assessments means and looks like for AEP and how it ties to this topic.
Yeah, so when we think about just transition, or just, get away from the catchphrase, but making that transition from a fossil-based to a clean energy economy, that's a very big change. And so from an internal perspective, what we're doing is giving employees opportunities to get exposed to different parts of the business so that they can see what other types of jobs there are. How do we get them ready skill-wise? Maybe they need a little bit more training or a certification or something, and they're almost there. So a good example, we have what's called an RSO, Regional Service Organization, that they travel from plant to plant. That's historically what they've done. They play a critical role during outages of coal units, but that's what they do. And as we retire, that coal fleet, we've already retired or sold more than 13,000 megawatts. And we announced a plan yesterday that by 2030, less than a decade from now, more than half of our total generating capacity will be wind and solar. When you think about that from a company like AEP, that is massive change. That's a lot of people, both in the company and outside of the company, that are going to be impacted by that. So we're looking for opportunities. We're doing everything we can to absorb as many of those employees as possible who want to stay, who are not ready for retirement, who don't want to go someplace else. And so those are some of the things that we're doing inside the company. Outside of the company, something that we started this a few years ago, we did a skills assessment within parts of our service territory in Kentucky, Ohio, and West Virginia. So for those who work at coal plants or in coal mines or in that supply chain, what kinds of skills do they have, and are they transferable to another industry? And if so, which one? And what we found in those studies is that the skills in our industry are transferable directly to the aerospace industry. And so what we did, we have this initiative called Appalachian Sky. And what we did was we took that information and then we went through the service territory and said, okay, well, if we wanted to attract the aerospace industry to Appalachia, where could we do that? And so we have sites throughout these 3 states that are aero certified, which means the aerospace industry and its full supply chain, if they relocate or expand into this region, they have a ready-made workforce that's there. They've got the skills, the infrastructure is there, the energy, support is there, and so we're working to build on that. So that's one of the things that we're doing externally, and it's that to me is a really exciting initiative because that goes far beyond what we're talking about, and really can have some significant impact in helping communities to transition to other industries even.
Yeah, I think that's really a fascinating example. And yeah, Charmaine, I'm curious your perspective, because I know you have your HR council that you run, and skills assessments are another thing that you've been giving some thought to. So curious what you think of what Sandy shared, and then what you've also been doing.
Yes, I wrote a note to call Sandy afterwards and have some more conversation about that, because that is right up my alley. So absolutely. One of the things that, excuse me, one of the things that on the HR Council is that we've talked about that directly, Sandy. It's an opportunity for HR. We have to adapt quickly to the changing workforce. It's fluctuating. The talent needs are fluctuating. And how do we make sure that our staff inside are ready for the technological changes that are coming, that are actually here, actually. So let's talk about the now And then the fact that it's going to constantly change over the years, right? I mean, we get a new iPhone every 12 months. And so everybody's got to catch up and try to figure out how to use this new phone. Technology is moving really quickly. And how do we make sure that we are staying on top of that so that we can retain our talent? And so one of the things that the council, and let me explain the council a little bit. The HR committee that I chair is in response to a technical program that I partner with one of our technical executives or senior technical executives here at EPRI in regards to a DOE project. And so one of the things on the technical side of that is they've been looking at technical training in colleges and universities and how to engage colleges and universities early. Again, getting to students before they graduate to say, hey, have you thought about the energy and utility industry? Here are some skills that you need in order to be really competitive in that industry, and working with different professors and different HBCUs as well, because we also have a diversity component to that also. And then what the HR committee is doing is really informing that group in regards to what are the skills that are needed? What are we seeing from an HR perspective that's going to be needed now and in the future to make sure that we have what we need so that we continue. Our industry is growing and changing dramatically. And a lot of times, college students, if you're graduating with an engineering degree, you're not thinking about, oh, I can't wait to work in a coal plant. That is not what you're thinking about doing. Or you may be thinking about a nuclear power plant. You may be thinking, definitely now you're thinking about wind and solar and all the renewable opportunities out there. And how can you impact the grid? And so there are different things that you can do with your engineering degree. We want to foster that. We want to help you understand what those things are. And so the HR committee is, again, informing the technical side of the business, where they're really talking about the skills and getting that group ready, the workforce of the future ready for the energy utility industry. And so one of the things is the skills assessment, and it is done differently across every organization. And how do you do that in an efficient and effective way? And so we are working on a tool, and there's so many tools out there from an HR perspective on how you could do it. But we're working on a tool that we can deliver to our members and say, this is what we found as a cutting edge opportunity, an innovative way to do a skills assessment. When you drop that tool in an organization, it's going to work differently in different companies because you have different jobs, you have a different focus in regards to how you want to grow your organization, but it can still be used. And so wanted to create a tool, work with an organization to help us create a tool that we can deliver to our members. That's a part of this HR committee that I chair, so that we can do a better job of the skills assessment and thinking about that. Some of them are doing this. Some of them are saying, hey, can you help me? How do we get there and make sure that we don't lose the people that we have? So they're doing reskilling, retooling, saying, here are different training programs that you can participate in to build up your skill set so that you're ready to go do this job that we're getting ready to create. So lots of work around that, but very excited to hear what AEP is doing as well. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and we have a good question in the queue here for you, Sandy, around, is there something, Charmaine's talking about one way EPRI may be able to help, but is there other things that we as an institute can be doing to help get this reskilling done quicker, less expensive, more effective for you as a company?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And yes, there is. So here's what I see. We have the LCRI, we have a new project on social cost of carbon, and now we have 3 times to 2030. So we've got 3 different major initiatives that EPRI is leading, that member companies and AEP is involved in all 3 of those. Is there a component around environmental justice, just transition, the people piece of it? When I looked at the 3 times to 2030, I saw 1 bullet point on a smooth transition, and that's it. And I think that this needs to be a fundamental piece of all of these projects. We can't be doing this in silos. These things need to connect to each other. They all build upon each other. But I see an opportunity here for just this kind of thing that is woven into all of those initiatives, because I think that that's the way we do it as an industry. That's how we come out ahead. And that's how we make real progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We've been, oh, go ahead, Charmaine, sorry.
No, I was just agreeing. I was saying absolutely, you're right. I think that we all have to work together. And that is one of the things that I think has been so wonderful for me to be on the HR committee that supports the program on the technical side is called GridEd/GREAT. And so to support that program from an HR committee perspective has been even more eye-opening for me to see that not just EPRI struggling with trying to make sure that we're keeping people skilled and bringing in the right skill sets, but our industry, it's an opportunity across the board.
Yeah. This is so interesting, and we've really been focusing on workforce. I want to kind of transition a bit, pun intended, to communities, because that's an important part of this conversation too, right? So there's how do you do distribution justice, right? So this is how do you fairly allocate costs and benefits to various communities. There's procedural justice on how do you actually bring the right voices to the table to inform the planning and the processes. So Sandy, I'm curious, when it comes to community engagement, what are some of the things that AEP is doing and thinking about in this clean energy transition to make sure that communities are brought along as a whole?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So I'm actually leading two different teams, and they probably should be one team. One is just transition, and one is environmental justice. And I can see them coming together eventually. The difference with the just transition piece is that it's going by operating company and plant by plant, whereas environmental justice will hit across the organization, whether you're talking transmission siting or siting of new renewable resources or something in distribution. And it shows up, we had a transform, I think it was a substation actually, that we wanted to build in a community in Ohio. And the community said no. Environmental justice is coming up, why didn't we engage better? Is that something that we could have done a little bit better job of, in that regard? So what I have are cross-functional teams, and I'll speak to the just transition first, because I think that that's a great example. We know that we know that this is a big issue, right? Both of these are very big, complicated issues. It's not something that we as a company or a community or a plant can solve all on their own. We don't have the capacity to just say, here's a check for the taxes that we're, not going to be paying you anymore. We'll do this for 5 years. And that's not sustainable. We want to build the capacity within those communities so that they can be sustainable on their own. So that means training people, and that means, bringing the right voices to the table. So with one of our plants in Texas that I'm working with our Southwestern Electric Power Company right now, SWEPCO, we've brought a cross-functional team internally, and they've already laid the foundation from an economic development, community relations. They know that we need to talk to the mayor and the city council, and we need to talk to the school superintendent. And there's a very influential county judge we need to, bring into this process. But there are many other voices too. So we've started to make a list of what, communities that we think are the right need to be part of this process, but we don't have all the answers. So we're going to convene that group in the next couple of weeks and start having a conversation about who needs to be part of this conversation. We're also looking for other organizations to collaborate with and to partner with, because we don't have all the expertise either, right? I mean, we've got a really great economic development program where we go into communities and train local economic development professionals so they have the skills to be able to do that, attracting new business on their own. Again, it's about giving those communities the capacity to do it themselves to be sustainable for the long term. And that's really the approach that we're taking on that. It's not, because we did that. We wrote a check. We had a unit that we retired, and we wrote a check for like 3 to 5 years after the fact. That is not what we want to be able to do. The strength of our communities is tied to our own success. And so our intent is not to, padlock the gate and walk away. And so how do we make sure that that's not what we're doing? So we're definitely planning significant local engagement, and that's, then they'll own it, right? They'll own it, and that's what it is. it's helping them to have that ownership and build those skills.
Yeah, I love that. So with 5 minutes to go, I'm going to open up a conversation that's probably worth 5 hours, but you can't have these conversations without metrics, right? And this is actually a space that I think is really difficult when it comes to metrics. So Charmaine, maybe I'll start with you. When you think about your role and how you measure and track success, what are some metrics that you're thinking about?
Right. So new into this role, laser focus on diversity, and EPRI's been committed to diversity, equity, inclusion for over 40 years, right? But elevating this role into and putting it into the executive ranks puts more of a laser focus on it, and that's definitely what we're looking to do. Going to use this year to really look at some capturing data and creating some baseline information to see really where is it that we need to go. So we're working with different consulting organizations like Gartner to really see what are some HR scorecard metrics that we can do, we can look at, not wanting to be too prescriptive in our organization regarding diversity, but also wanting to do some things to see how we can move the needle. So where are we at today? What are some baseline metrics that we can capture? So we're using this year, these 12 months of 2021 to really figure that piece out. And then beyond that, looking at, okay, how have we met those different metrics, and how have we moved the needle regarding diversity? Some things that we're looking at regarding benefits options, how we set up different leave options for individuals, our structure, the leaves, our compensation, our flexible work arrangements, lots of different things that we're looking at to say, okay, here's the baseline of where we are. And what a dynamic year we've just come out of. So it's going to be interesting to even capture that information because it's been quite a dynamic year, but really trying to level set things and create a baseline for ourselves, create ourselves an HR dashboard that then we can feel comfortable sharing with the organization to say, listen, we were here and now we're here in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, that's really, it's going to be a busy year, I can tell. I'm curious, Sandy, from your perspective, right? So we know we have reduction of metric tons or tons of CO2 to get to decarbonization and track that. What are you guys doing when it comes to the clean energy transition, though, and metrics for AEP?
I think a lot of it is, a lot of the same things that you would think of. We've actually integrated our renewable growth. So how fast are we transitioning into our long-term incentive compensation plans? We have tied that into a new $5 billion credit revolver for the company. So we've tied those ESG metrics to our clean energy strategy. And, if we do it well, we pay lower prices. If we don't, we pay more for that credit. So those are a couple of real hardcore business. But the other piece of this, I think, is, and this is where we did this project with you guys last year on context-based metrics around diversity and inclusion. And, we say we want to look like and be like the communities that we serve, but, we learned through that process, that project, that we don't look like the communities. There are some gaps we need to fill. And how can we move the needle forward on environmental justice if we don't even have a good sense of, what those communities are and are made up, and how we're part of that. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done on the right metrics. I don't think we're there yet, but those are a couple of things that I can think of and point to and say, yeah, this could really help us. Yeah.
All right. Well, we have 1 minute, so we'll do a lightning round question in 2 seconds. I want to say this is really just the beginning, right? We have so much that we didn't even begin to touch on that are critical parts of this conversation. So we really want to continue this dialogue. We've got research throughout the Institute that touches on these topics, but we really want to continue this conversation. So if you want to be a part of that, drop a yes in the chat, email us at sustainability@epri.com. But in the meantime, I like to kind of end these on a high note. So instead of what keeps you up at night, what lets you sleep? For me, it's that we have the two of you at the helm driving this, but Charmaine, maybe quickly, what lets you sleep at night? And then Sandy, I'll let you close us out.
One of the things quickly, it's that lets me sleep, not keeps me awake. That lets me sleep at night, because there's a different twist on that question, is that we have a commitment to diversity, and to hear the conversation even today is so charging for me. It just invigorates my my passion around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all the work that EPRI is doing, and that we will do over the next several years to move the needle.
Yeah. And Sandy?
And I would say we've got this, right? I mean, this is an industry that can do this. I'm confident of that. And I see initiatives like LCRI, cost to carbon, and then this 3 times by 2030. And I see great opportunity, and that really makes me excited.
Well, that's a great place to end it. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us today for this conversation, for joining us throughout the week for EPRI's Earth Week Speaker Series, and hope you all have a great rest of your day and weekend. We will capture those who want to continue the conversation from the chat. Again, email us at sustainability@epri.com, and have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.